Welcome to part 5 of Competency 1. In this video, we will work with order of operations. Okay, before we begin, we need to talk a little bit about order of operations. Okay, this is what we called PEMDAS in school. And that is just an acronym that describes the order of items that we consider. However, it doesn't quite tell us exactly what to do. For example, parentheses is parentheses, but also various types of brackets. And we have listed here one type of bracket. There are others, and how they're placed in a problem determines the order. Okay, then we have exponents or roots. And a lot of times in school, as the E is represented, that's exponents. But that means roots too, because technically a square root, see here we have x and x squared. Well, the square root can be represented as x to the 1/2 power. This is something that we often don't go over well as educators with our students. And then in advanced math, you need to know all these things because that manipulation is required. It's very much required, let's say in Cal 1. Cal 1, I saw these problems all the time, to the half power. So you have to understand where that comes from, as well as a negative half power. Anyway, moving on. Now, another thing that they don't tell you or discuss as far as this acronym, PEMDAS is MD, which is multiply, divide. The students often don't realize that those are what we might call on the same level of importance. Once we get to them, we simply do those in order, both of them, multiply and divide. Dividing is not after multiplying, and multiplying is not after dividing. The way that we have it here in PEMDAS, MD, multiply, divide, that's not their order. We simply read them left to right like a book and do them in that order. Okay. The same applies for addition and subtraction. Addition does not necessarily come before subtraction. That is not the case. Yeah, it's not the best acronym in the world, but it is something for the student to remember. But it doesn't tell the student the order of things, okay? So when we see addition and subtraction, just like multiplying and dividing, we read like a book, left to right, and just do them in that order, okay? So let's look at number 1. Okay, we have 2 we can do here below. Okay, number 1 says, what is the value of 70 minus 20 divided by 4 plus 1 minus 18 plus 2 times 8? Okay, sure, I could pencil this out, but I'm not going to. Our calculator handles that order of operations. We don't have to worry about any of this on testing. Now, if you want to do it by hand first, great. Stop the video, do it by hand, and then let's put it in our calculator to verify. Okay, and I did them in many different ways. I did them by hand. I popped it into the internet, as well as putting it on different calculators. I used more than just the one here. This is the 30XB, as I've stated in other videos. I also use at home a 30XS, and then I have some others that I like. So you can just use different things to verify your answer. Okay, so let's do this. 70 minus the 20, divide by 4 plus the 1 minus the 18 plus 2 times 8. Now you need to make sure that you entered it correctly. Every now and again, I hit the wrong button. I'm going to arrow over. Make sure you know to arrow over. Check the whole thing. Now let's push enter and see what happens. And there you go. That is the correct answer. Option C, 64. Now, I've also played around with incorrect answers, and I think one of these here, a couple of these, one is far-fetched, and the other two will give you an incorrect answer. So if you're doing it by hand, please be careful. Okay, let's look at number 2. What is the value of this expression? Well, let's go ahead and just put it in our calculator. Now, note, I am putting it in the calculator precisely the way it's typed. That way, my calculator reads the correct order of operations. Now, one thing I need to note is when you have certain exponents, not exponents, I'm sorry, negatives. This is entered as a negative as well as this one, okay? Not to be confused with my regular subtraction, which would be right here. That is just subtraction. And how do I know the difference? How I know the difference is there's actually a number, an integer in front. That 3 tells me use subtraction, okay? And we'll encounter these on other problems. So let's enter it. So I have negative, parentheses, -3, close my parentheses, to the second power plus 15, divide. Now, in parentheses, that's where I have my 3 minus the 8. Close my parentheses, plus 2. Now, I'm dividing by 2 squared. Nope, not squared. Uh-oh. I'm going to arrow back over. And see how I can just arrow back and highlight? That's really convenient with the TI calculators. Okay, now, see, it just types a 3. And I can arrow back over and I can double check my entries. If I have to, I have the ability to arrow and retype over everything like I did before. Let's say you have a subtraction instead of a negative or a negative instead of subtraction. Don't worry about it. You'll have the ability to type over. And looks like I'm good to go here, so I'm going to push enter. Now I see a -11 on D, but it has 0.75. Now I already know that that's 3/4 fraction wise, but don't worry about that. We have a couple options. The first thing I'm going to do is above the enter, there's those back and forth arrow. Well, that's the toggle arrows. Those are the ones that get you from decimals to fractions. So let's push that. Well, this is what it does. It gives us a full fraction. Okay, well, that toggle won't work, but there is one that does work. D is, I'm going to go ahead and circle D. D is a mixed number. And up here above my x to the 10 to the nth, that's a scientific notation button. Above that button, I have the proper toggle. Okay, so let's push second and that button. And now I know it's kind of hard to read, but that's what you want to see on your screen. Push enter, and there you go. So just be aware of how these toggles work. These little arrows back and forth. You make sure that you have the right notation so that you with the fraction n over d, that means that's whole number with numerator over denominator. That's the one we wanted. Okay, let's move on to number 3. Number 3, Mr. Adams sold tomatoes at a local market over a 2-week period. Okay, now they give us the details of the market. He sold 4 4/5 pounds of tomatoes each of 3 days during the first week, and then he sold 5.6 pounds of tomatoes each of the 4 days during the second week. How many pounds of tomatoes did Mr. Adams sell during the 2-week period? Okay, yeah, we could do this problem in steps, like in our calculator, but that's not the point of it. Well, we know that the first week, the first thing happening was 4 and 4/5 times the 3 days. And then we know on the second week, we have 5.6 times 4 days. Okay. And we have to add those together to get the total. So, really, honestly, what we're looking at here is 4 and 4/5 times the 3 plus 5.6 times the 4. Okay, now you could put parentheses around things, but let's take a look to see if our calculator won't just read that order of operations for us. And actually, it does. Um, this is one of the wonderful things of having a device, that you can use on your test. This is, amazing. So let's put that in. Now, we need a mixed number first. So that is above our fraction number. So second fraction, and we have 4, arrow over 4/5. Okay, arrow all the way out. Now let's go times the 3 plus 5.6 times, that was 4 days. Okay, and looks like we have like some kind of an outdoor market going on here. So he's not selling every day, or maybe he wasn't able to come for the whole market each week. Okay, doesn't matter. We have a nice setup for what actually occurred at the market. So now let's push enter, and that gives us the correct amount. Okay, you can do those separately if you like to see how that comes out. I've double checked that value, and that's exactly how much he sold. Okay, now let's look at the next one. Let's see, it looks like we have some more. Good. All right, now the next one. Well, this is a different situation. It says, what is the value of this fraction? Well, it's a whole expression. Now, it has absolute value. Now, note that those are just straight up and down bars. They're not brackets. However, when we look at this whole numerator, there is no negative and there is no subtraction. Therefore, putting that in our calculator is not a big deal. We can just use parentheses to deal with the whole thing because it won't change the outcome. If there were a negative embedded somewhere or a subtraction, then I would be weary. But because it's all positive, absolute value does nothing. It's all positive anyway. So let's just put that in our calculator, but with parentheses, because our calculator does not have absolute value. Okay. So you push a fraction, set up first, and begin with the numerator. 2 plus 4 parentheses, 7 plus 2 squared, close the parentheses and go down. Then 4 times 2 plus 5 times the 3. And you can arrow all the way out to take a good look at it. Okay, make sure we entered everything properly. I would say yes. So let's push enter. And the value we need is 2. Okay. Like I said before, you can try this by hand. Also, try putting it in a more powerful calculator, also like a TI-84, and also online programs would be great. Just to double check so you've proved to yourself that this very, let's say, minimal type calculator, scientific, does what we need. And it does. We just have to know how to read the question properly, which is also the case on number 5. Okay, for this expression, we have brackets and absolute value going on. So this is what we need to know. The first thing I need to see is these brackets. Well, we can turn these brackets into parentheses. Your calculator reads it just fine. It's their placement is why it reads it okay. Now, the absolute value. Well, we do have a subtraction in here. Okay, it's minus 5, but I'm okay with it, and I'll tell you why. Because that is to the second power. Any even power always just makes everything positive anyway. So the fact that there's an absolute value doesn't matter. We can use parentheses because this is even. The minute we see an even power, that just tells me whatever is inside the absolute value doesn't matter, because to the second power, to the fourth power, to the sixth power, it's all going to be even in the end anyway. Okay, so for this, we have a very safe setup. We can just put in parentheses instead. So let's do that. Okay, we set up our fraction. Now put in the numerator. Okay, 5 plus 3 squared minus 24, and then we divide, and then 6 times 2. And that is all correct. I like it. So let's go down to the denominator. Now we have to make sure that we put in our parentheses exactly the way we have it on our paper. Okay, so we have parentheses 5 plus 3, another parentheses 2 squared minus 5. Now we have a parentheses and another parentheses. That's essential. You have to have that. Your parentheses in the beginning must match how many you have in the end, and it does. Okay. Now plus, and then we have parentheses 2 squared. Okay, and then oh, it's minus 5 again. Now that's very curious. Okay, so minus 5 and then parentheses, but we have to square that. And let's double check that we've done that correctly. Okay, and I agree with it. Looks like, remember, you can always arrow over to go back and look at the front part. And I like it. Okay. All right. I'm going to arrow all the way out so you can kind of see what it's going to look like on your calculator. Okay. See, I have it all the way out and we look good. So we push enter and the value is 2 again. Okay. All right. Which is just a coincidence. Okay. But like I said, put these in other calculators, work it out by hand, verify it for yourself. Now let's look at number 6. Ooh, this is very complex. However, I see some things going on that are very important. Now, the difference between a negative and a positive is very evident in the numerator. Okay. So let me use a little highlighting. Obviously, the first minus 3, that's a negative, and the next one. So those are negatives. We'll have to use that negative button at the bottom. And now here, I'm going to circle this. See how that has 1 and then the minus after it? That's an actual minus. So that's subtraction. Because of the number 1 in front, that's subtraction. Now, when we go over behind that, we have minus 10. That is an actual negative. That is a negative. Why? Because you have a bracket in front of it. That is not an integer or any kind of a number. So that will not, that will be the negative button at the bottom. Okay, now that's the same with the 6. However, this 10 means that that's subtraction. Okay, that's the difference. Okay, so notice wherever I have it highlighted, there's not a number in front. There's either a parentheses or a bracket. Now let's deal with the bracket. We just put in parentheses for that because it's not absolute value. And at this point, the bracket is simply like, let's say, extra dressing. So as long as we use a parentheses where those are, precisely the way it's written, we'll be fine. Now, we go below to our denominator. Okay, where we have 4 plus 5, that we can use parentheses, okay? So we'll use parentheses for those. Now let's go below that. Okay, let's look at that denominator. I don't see anything with absolute value, anything weird going on. In every one of the minuses, we use actual subtraction. So we don't have to type a negative for those. So we're okay. And then we just need to make sure that we arrow all the way over to do the plus 12. That's a little more complex, but let's clear everything out. I'm going to clear everything so we can see how this goes, okay? All right, so let's try this in our calculator. First, we have to push fraction. We've set up a fraction. Before we do anything else with setup, let's put in our full numerator, okay? Exactly as typed. So 13 plus parentheses. Now that's a negative 3. Close the parentheses and square it. Now plus 4. We have another parentheses minus the 3. Close it. Now we have plus 1. Now that's a subtraction because of the 1. Now we have a parentheses, okay? But that is going to be a minus 10. I mean a negative. We push the negative 10. Okay, so there, let's put in our 10. But because we put in a 10, now we can say subtract. Now we have our parentheses. Well, because of the parentheses, we have to put in a negative 6 and close it, and then close it again. Because we had another parentheses. So make sure, see where that minus 10 is, negative 10? Well, that's a parentheses. Then we have another parentheses. So we have to close with 2. So now we have everything entered on the top the way it should be. Now let's go down to our denominator. Now our denominator has a fraction within it. So simply push the fraction button, okay? Put in the numerator exactly the way it's typed. So that would be parentheses 4 plus 5 and parentheses, okay? Now we go down and we have to put in that denominator. Well, there's no issues with absolute values or negatives and positives. So we just need to type it in the way it is. So 4 squared minus the 3 squared. Okay, now parentheses 4 minus 3, close our parentheses, and then minus 8. Now, you may be weary of this parentheses in front of the minus 8. Well, here's the difference. That's a closed parentheses, not an open parentheses. Because it's closed, that whole 4 minus 3 is considered a value, an integer, okay? And that's why we can do it, because we have closed everything. So you just use subtraction if everything's closed. It's those open parentheses that I have highlighted in the numerator that give you that situation, okay? Make sure you make a note of it and are fully aware of that. Now, we have to arrow over all the way. Now we can put in plus 12, okay? I'm just going to give a little double check, make sure I like everything on the bottom. And see, I can arrow over, I can go up, and I can, I went too far. You see what happened? Now, see where I am? So make sure that you're in the right place, okay? I like everything. Okay, now here's something you need to know. Let's say I typed something in wrong. I'm going to go all the way down. Let's say I typed it in wrong. And that's a lot to have typed in this multi-view. It doesn't show it in a little space like other calculators. So if I make a mistake, there's unique things about this calculator. It does let me push the clear button and then just go right back to it and fix it. But let's see if I have to fix it. So let's push enter. And the answer is actually 5. So I entered everything correctly. So I'm happy with my value. But let me show you something before we do anything else, okay? I'm going to arrow up, okay? I'm on the 5. But now the whole thing is highlighted, okay? So I'm capturing it. So I can capture it. I can push enter, and now I have it back. All right, now I'm going to type in a mistake intentionally, okay? And I want to show you how we can go fix it. Right? So I'm going to arrow over, and let's arrow up and up and up, and I want to go right here. See where that 6 is? We typed in a negative correctly. Well, let's say I made a mistake, okay? I'm going to subtract. Okay, so that's the actual subtraction. See what I did? Now I'm going to push enter. Oh, see what happened? It says you didn't type something incorrectly, which is usually your negatives. Okay, so this is what I can do. Push the clear button and it sends me right back. I don't have to type the whole thing over. And that's something about this calculator most people don't know. It's my favorite thing about this little model of calculator. And when you take your test, if they give you questions like this, you are going, any test, you're going to love it because I don't have to do it over. So I put in a subtraction by mistake, and I can see that because it's level with the subtraction above it. It should be raised a little like what's in front of my 10 right here. So I'm going to push the negative button. Now see how it's raised a little bit? So now it's correct. So now I can push enter. And there you go. It gave me the correct value. It's one of my absolute favorite things. These little calculators, maybe they seem like they're not going to help you out, but if you really know what you're doing, they can be amazing and save you tons of time. Okay? And this is the last question in this particular video. I hope you learned something about your calculator. I know that I love this little calculator and the family of calculator, even though it's not as fancy, let's say, as the TI-84. It is a fun little calculator. And guys, thank you so much for watching and subscribing and liking us. I really like all the extra likes we've been getting lately. You guys are the best. And our new subscribers, kudos to you. And you know what, guys? I wish every single one of you happy testing.